So this video is pretty much going to be me defending A Court of Wings and Ruin and pretty much trashing A Court of Frost and Starlight. Hello! So today I'm going to be continuing my reread and comparing my first impressions as well as my current thoughts to the ACOWAR series. So today I'm going to be finishing up my thoughts on A Court of Wings and Ruin, and I'm going to also be doing my thoughts on A Court of Frost and Starlight. So pretty much continuing on from what I said last time. What did I say last time? Good question. So I'm pretty sure where I left off at talking about ACOWAR was pretty much the High Lord meeting. At least that's what last I remember talking about was the High Lord meeting and everything regarding that, everything as far as like the bets they placed and about the fights and the fight that actually happened between Baron and Azrael. And yeah, it was a lot of messiness, a lot of drama in that whole couple of chapters, and I'm just the whole time sitting there like, this is a lot going on. Like, it was like I didn't think there was that much animosity between the High Lords, at least like in the other books it wasn't always said to be that way, you know? Like I know like with the Winter Court, with everything that happened with Amarantha, like of course like Callias, the High Lord of the Winter Court, was gonna blame Rhys, but like, and of course like Tarquin after Akamath, like they had the blood ruby, so he's feeling kind of weird, but like I don't know, like I feel like Baron, the High Lord of Autumn, is just like a douche just to be a douche. Like what was his reason to be like this? Like, did he have a reason? Like, sure, he was there under the mountain, but at the same time, it's just like what is your reason? Like, Tamlin is just, you know, angry because like obviously like the woman who's gonna marry is with someone else with her maid. So like I guess he has a reason to be upset, but what is Baron's motive? Like what's wrong with him? And also like I hate the way he treats his wife, the not the High Lady of Autumn, the Lady of the Autumn Court. It's just, I don't know. It's like you see like, oh, the Autumn Court, and you're just like, why did we think that the Night Court was the worst? At least why did they think that the Night Court was the worst? Like I don't understand, when like Baron exists, how you thought Rhys was the worst. Like how did you get to this conclusion? There's also like when Tamlin shows up, there's like this really big shift and everyone's just like quiet. And also they didn't have like this extra chair for him because they didn't think he was going to show up because he was kind of in cahoots with Hybern. But then like, you know, Tamlin obviously starts his drama, and you hadn't stolen my bride away in the night, Rhys, and I would not have been forced to take such drastic measures to get her back. And Feyre's just like, well, the sun was shining when I left you, so I don't know why you're still doing this. And then Tamlin keeps going, and then it's this whole thing, and then Rhys takes away his ability to speak, which is definitely one of the best parts of this book. Definitely one of the best parts. Like Tamlin's mouth is just moving and just not saying anything, and I'm just like, yeah, that's well deserved. And then it also gets pretty sad here because then pretty much Rhys has to try to defend himself, like after like, you know, the 49 years that under Amarantha he had to be, you know, play at being evil. And Callias is the High Lord of the Winter Court, and he's pretty much, this happened I think in the first ACOWAR novel where like there was this blight that killed like a dozen Winter Court children, and you know he blames on Rhys because the Daemati did it, and Rhys is kind of just like, I didn't do it, and then he's pretty much saying like that he tried, and then Callias is just like, well, tell that to all dead children that you just tried. And then he has to like pretty much like prove that like he was like, he couldn't do anything else, like he was confined with Amarantha, and then he admits that like, oh, where did she confine you? And he's like, her bedroom. Like, you know, it was kind of like everything was like real at that point. Like we knew it was happening, but it's like, you know, here he like openly admits like everything that happened in those 49 years. And then of course the tension kind of shifts back to like Tamlin, because everyone's just like, okay, Tamlin, why are you here? And also no one wants to talk about like their plans, because obviously if Tamlin's still like in cahoots with Qyburn, why would you want to speak in front of a person that's not really on your side? This is kind of where Varian from the Summer Court kind of admits that like, yeah, I kind of sent them when there was the battle on Adriata, and you know Tarquin's kind of like, how come you guys were the only ones that helped? And then Varian's like, yeah, I sent them, because you know Varian's kind of interested in Amren at this point, so that's the thing. And then pretty much he rescinds blood rubies. He's like, okay, fine, I guess you guys helped, I guess I don't have to, like, kill you anymore. Like, and also during this, the High Lord of the Dawn Court brings in this woman, and she pretty much has this antidote for the Fey that's like in like the arrows, and like pretty much stops people's like powers from working. So like she has this antidote, and she's kind of like, hey guys, you should take this. I tested it. She's an alchemist, so she knows how to work with those kind of like things, those like elements and stuff. And of course, Baron has to be like, I'm not taking that, and everyone else, like Reese, is just like, yeah, I'll take it, because it just makes more sense. It's like, well, if you have a chance to not, lose your powers on the battlefield, that would kind of make sense to take the antidote. But he's just being stubborn, and then Eris, his son, is even like, yeah, I'll take it, and Baron's just kind of like, what? So that's the thing. Also, from like this book, I've noticed that like I don't know if it's like just the Dawn Court and Day Court that seemed like more technologically or like scientifically advanced, because like they have alchemy, they have like tinkerers, they have people like pretty much mechanics and stuff. And pretty much this woman, I think, is the woman who built Lucian's metal eye, because she has like a metal arm. So it's like, as far as technology, like I wasn't sure where like Prithian is as far as technology. Like it's hard to tell sometimes, but like I guess like certain courts are probably more advanced than others. Like that's what I'm assuming at this point. Also, backtracking, I forgot the library, like under the House of Wind. That's where, well, this is where Feyre discovers his library, and Reese is pretty much like, the priestesses have, been through a lot of trauma, and here they're safe. No one's allowed in without their permission, which is like also kind of like Reese's sanctuary, which like I like that part. I think that was like, that was a cute moment. It was kind of just like, you know, I don't know how to explain it. It was nice. It's like, oh, they have like this little sanctuary with the priestesses, and Reese, has been through a lot too, so it's also his sanctuary. I don't know. I thought it was cute. And also, further backtracking, Elaine is a seer, so during this book is kind of where she, is obviously depressed after everything with Grayson and being turned to High Fae and knowing that she can't go back to the human lands. So she pretty much isn't eating, isn't sleeping, and she's talking in these very like cryptic sentences. And Azriel realizes that she's a seer, and she can pretty much see things that are to come. And also, it's said that Nesta has powers, but they're not really like obvious here. Like pretty much everyone's guessing like, well, yeah, Nesta is very powerful. We just don't know what the powers are at this point. And then I think I remember reading this the first time and thinking that like obviously I don't know how war works and like what goes into planning it, but obviously these people being Fae and living in like this kind of world where there's like these creatures, magical creatures and stuff, it's a little bit easier because Feyre is literally just like, hey, Bone Carver, would you like to join us? And Bone Carver's just like, yeah, as long as you get this like creepy mirror, then yeah, we're good. And even like Briaxis, it's like, yeah, I guess it is easier when you have like literal like, I think they're called like death gods or something, like on your side. Obviously, it makes things a little bit easier. And the king has like the cauldron. Like, obviously, having magic is probably going to make some battles a little bit more interesting, you know? I know later on in the novel we do see like a shred of like Nesta's power, I think, but like it's not really touched on fully again until A Court of Silver Flames. Also, we find out a lot more. I know in ACOMAF we do talk about like Miriam and Drakon and pretty much what happened during the war 500 years ago, but we do touch a lot more upon that in this book. Also, we discover that there's other winged creatures besides like Drakon's people and the Illyrians called the Peregrines, which are at the Dawn Court. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting because it's like we see a lot more of the world in this novel, and I think that's really helpful because it's just like before this point we've only been in kind of the human realm, the Spring Court, Under the Mountain, and then the Night Court, but like now we're kind of like branching out and seeing a lot more. Also, as far as Helion, first of all, I love Helion's like entrance, but it's also like the fact that like he's like trying to get Cassian and Moore to have a threesome with him. It's amazing. It's like it's hilarious because it's like you don't see it coming. At least the first time I read it, I did not see that coming. I didn't think he was just gonna be like, "Hey, you guys want to like?" How would you have seen that coming? And then it's funny because he even says that Thesson, he finds my males to be prettier than yours, I think. And Thesson's like, I think it's a wing fetish. Like, There are some like good moments like that, like one-liners and like cool things like that in the book, and I always like that because I like seeing like characters have a sense of humor about things. And I feel like I have a theory. I think Reese Loki wants a threesome because literally on page 451, like Feyre talking about like Helion and like the threesome, she's like, "Why the hell haven't they said yes?" And then Reese is just like, "Would you like someone to join us in bed, Feyre, darling?" And then he's like, "I think you'd like two males worshiping you." Like, is it just me or does he feel like? I feel like he would be really into that. Like, I think even like in like ACOFAS, it's like talked about, and it's just like, is it a thing that's like gonna happen, or at least the Reese kind of wants it to happen? I don't know. Like that's just my theory. Is that he low key wants a threesome too. He's just not gonna admit it outright. Also, they realize, well, at least Feyre realizes after like putting the pieces together and finding out that Helion actually had an affair with the Lady of Autumn Court, Lucian's mom, and giving the timeline and given the fact that like Lucian looks a lot like Helion and not a lot like his brothers. And putting two together, she's like, Helion's Lucian's dad. And Reese is like, what? He's like, I never thought about that. And I like how Feyre hasn't been around this long, but she was able to figure this out quickly, but no one else will. Like, how come no one else, like the centuries old Fae, weren't able to figure this out over the years, but she was, like, one of the first times she meets Helion? Like, I don't know. It's just like, how did she just know, like almost instinctively, but no one else peeped that? Like, I don't know. So that was a little bit like it was an interesting reveal, but it was kind of just like, how come she was the only person that noticed this? Even Reese never noticed, you know? And we also see how like unhappy the Lady of Autumn is, and like during her time with Helion having the affair, she was happier, and it's like you even see like her like in the novel, like she isn't really talking that much. She's pretty much like, you know, second to Baron, who's the High Lord of Autumn, and it's like she's too thin, she doesn't say anything. It's like pretty much that is what Feyre would have been if she stayed in the Spring Court. At least that's like the assumption here. And like later after the first meeting, they do have this like cute moment where, well, it's kind of just like Feyre's just like, yeah, Tamlin's like sleeping under this roof as well, so I don't want to do anything. And then Reese is like, yeah, it's understandable. So like they have this like cute moment where they're just talking and they're cuddling, and she's just like, I want to share this bed with you. I want you to hold me. He's like, always. And I'm like, that's a cute moment because like I don't know, like I feel like at least it's like these people like each other, and it's not just like I don't know. I feel like in ACOFAS, it's kind of just like all they want to do is have sex. But I feel like this kind of proves like obviously they can be intimate in other ways. They talk to each other. It's just in the next book, it's just like their relationship is like, what is happening? Like I don't know. There's like a couple steps backward in that book. But this, yeah, like they have some like really cute moments that are like really sweet. And also as far as the Nessian moments in this book, they're definitely like a lot. Like I feel like it's like you have to like keep an eye out for them because some of them go by really fast. But there's definitely like during war, like pretty much anytime like Cassian was on the battlefield, Nesta was just like staring intently, like pretty much making sure he was okay. And then even like after the one battle, like she was listening to like the Illyrian soldiers whispering how Cassian had thrown that spear, how he'd cut down soldiers like stalks of wheat, how he'd fought like Annihilus, their most ancient warrior god and the first of the Illyrians. And like she's like watching and listening like to all of this. Like I feel like Nesta's the kind of person that like she's very observant, and I think like she'll like sit and watch something and like take note of it instead of like saying it right away. At least definitely like as far as like during the war she's like this. But I also wanted to bring up the fact that like there's a couple instances like in the book where like Moore acts really weird as far as like Nesta and Cassian. Like she has like this thing where Nesta and Cassian kind of have this moment where like she's like wrapping I think his arm in a bandage, and you know, Moore kind of comes in, and then Cassian snatches his hand back, and they start like having like this witty banter. Then Nesta kind of leaves, and I don't know, it feels weird. And there was another moment where like Moore kind of like acted weird, where like Nesta and Cassian had a moment, and it's like I wouldn't call it jealousy necessarily, but it's almost like Moore doesn't want Cassian to get distracted with Nesta, because I guess like because then she doesn't have a buffer against Azrael. But again, I feel like it's just easier for her to tell the guy that rather than having him pine after her, and then it's like, oh, well, Cassian can't be the buffer anymore. It's just like I feel like that's too much pressure on Cassian at that point, and it's like she's expecting this, and I get that's her friend and she wants to talk to him, but like, girl, don't you have other friends? Like, I don't know. It just that like part about Moore kind of made me feel kind of weird, like the way she acted around like Nesta. Also, definitely like one of the saddest moments in the book is when like Feyre, like first of all, she didn't even have to catch the cereal. The cereal just kind of appears because he's just like, hey, we met thrice this time, and it's like, you know, the cereal gets attacked by like Anthe and her guards, and luckily Feyre's able to like go to the Weaver's cottage and lure them there, and Anthe and her guards die a very well deserved death. But you know, the cereal dies slow death, and he's kind of just like he wants her to stay with her, and I'm just like, oh, this is so sad. Like, I don't know. This is definitely one of the saddest moments of the books because, like, the cereal is just pretty much like Feyre's friend at this point. Like, he literally just shows up. Like, she doesn't even have to catch him because he just is like, yeah, I'm gonna answer all your questions. Like during the war, it's almost like a competition between who can be like the most self-sacrificing the most. Like it's like first Cassian like gets like injured badly and his guts are hanging out and he has to like heal for a couple days, and then it's like, you know, during when Elaine gets kidnapped, then Feyre and Ezreal have to like get her back. Like his wings get injured, and it's this thing where he has to heal, and then during the battle he's like, let me out there, and Reese just like, no, you're injured. He's like, I'm still gonna do it. And then Reese is like, well, I'm gonna chain you to a tree. And then Ezra's just like, well, I'm just gonna fly around with the tree on my back. And I'm just like, why is like I get like obviously you want to do something and you definitely don't want to sit and lay like back while there's a whole ass war going on. At the same time, it's just like they like those three were just like having a competition about who was the most self-sacrificing. And even like Cassian at some point is just like, hey Reese, you sacrificed a lot for us. Let me do something for you. And it's like, you know, I get that's supposed to be like, you know, emotional. It's like, you know, they care a lot about each other, but it's just like, I feel like it's like a competition between them at this point. But like, I definitely do think like there's some highlights of this novel. I think my favorite parts of it now are different from what it was before. Like, I think that one part where like they go to like Grayson's, like Elaine's ex-fiance house, like when Nesta slaps him, that's definitely one of the best parts of the book for me. Like that, I don't know why, but that did it for me. That was like, yes, this is my favorite part. Favorite parts is also like with the bone carver, like when she brings in the Ouroboros, like the mirror. He's just like, oh, I didn't really want it. I just wanted to see if you can do it. And Vera's like, wait, you just wanted to see if I would actually do it? He was like, yeah, I just want to see if you were worthy. And I was just like, well, I guess you were worthy. But I guess it is a good test of like mental strength. But like, it's just like, that's a lot to put someone through just to be like, oh yeah, I'm gonna fight for you because you're worth it. Like, that's a lot. And then also like with the Weaver, like I don't think it like resaid how he like got the Weaver to like fight with them, but somehow he did, and he's like, oh yeah, I have tricks up my sleeve too. And it's like, oh yeah, it seems like everyone has tricks up their sleeve. At some point it gets to a point where there's too many tricks up the sleeves, you know? Like I feel like towards the end where it seems like all hope was lost, and then it's like Miriam Dracon and like all like I think they're called the Seraphim, like they show up and it's revealed that like they weren't like they thought that they disappeared from the island, but they actually didn't. It was just glamored, so it looked like no one was there. And Dracon's like, yeah, I guess it worked too well because it kept out both enemies and friends. And it's just, it's like, I get like they would have heard about it, but it feels like so like last minute where like everyone shows up. Because I guess like Sarah tried to put like the, you know, the all hope was lost, but then it's like, what's this? And same thing with like, um, you know, the Artron sisters, their dad, and like the fact that he got like 3 ships from them, and also like Vasa and Lucian's back. I get like how like those pieces fell into place. Like I get it because obviously it was mentioned that like their dad was on the continent figuring out something like the problem above the wall, and like I guess it makes sense that he would have shown up for the war. But even then, it's like all this seemed to happen around the same time. Like I don't know, it would have been nice if they were there a little earlier. I feel like it was like this kind of dramatic, like help is on the way kind of thing. But like I feel like, yeah, like I feel like it was kind of like dramatized a little bit more than it had to be. I mean, that being said, I get why it was kind of like shown that way, because again, it was like one of those like big like reveals. It's like, but I don't know. It just felt like kind of like, especially because it all happened around like the same time, like where Draken and Miriam come up, and like Feyre's father comes up with the ships. It just, I don't know. It's like, okay, sure, they have help now, but it's like, I don't know. It's unrealistic that they just all happen to come at the same exact time. It's like, so you guys were just like days late, just to be dramatic. I don't know. It was kind of weird. And then I also feel like one last thing I want to say about, first impressions and like current thoughts. Obviously, when you reread something, you can still have like the emotional impact, but I feel like something as such as like, page 666, of course, where like Reese like dies. It's like the first time I read it, it was like, but like this time it's kind of like, because he's gonna live, it's not like as impactful. And I guess that's the thing about like resurrection. It's like it kind of loses like the appeal of like the death, because the death isn't fully worth it. Although I think I understand while Sarah kind of brought Reese back. Obviously, Feyre was like devastated because her mate died. But I'm sure people's mates die all the time. But like I think the reason why, like obviously Reese had to be brought back, because we see through the bone carver that they have a son. And of course, like at this point, Feyre isn't pregnant yet. So it's like I get it, the resurrection, because it's like, well, yeah, in order for them to have a son, Reese kind of has to not die right now, So yeah, that's why like I was okay with that resurrection, just because it was just like, I mean, what the bone carver kind of showed wouldn't come true, and obviously has to come true at some point. So yeah, I was okay with that. I think like after that, it is like this whole thing where like all the High Lords are like there, and she's pretty much like begging them like, help me please. And of course like Baron's like hesitant, and then Tamlin's like the last one who does it, and he's like, be happy, Feyre. And it's like, obviously like he's still in love with Feyre, but I guess he's at this point where he's kind of just given up, because he kind of knows that that's kind of her mate, and the fact that like you can't fix that at that point. I think he's like accepting the fact that he can't change this at this point. Like it's kind of a done deal. And then another one of the best parts is when Helion is just like, you do know how to make an entrance, or should I say exit? And I'm just like, that's so mean. But it's kind of funny. It's like, yeah, he does know how to like. I feel like of all people, like Reese would have the most dramatic death, just because it just fits his whole aesthetic. And also after this, the war is pretty much over, but of course they still to discuss the treaty and peace and all that. And Feyre kind of uses the fact that like she was a human at some point to try to win them over. And also Vasa is there, and apparently she like got to know her father really well. And I don't know like how long of a span of time it was that they knew each other, because I think she said like he was almost like a father to her, and I was just thinking like, well, how long like was he like there? It's like, as far as the timeline, I'd be curious to see like how that went, like what happened while like Lucian was there like finding them, you know. And of course like while they're talking about like the new wall, like Feyre tells her story, but also Miriam and Drakon tell their story, which does help as far as like swaying people towards like what you want. It's like, well, we have like proof of like human fairy relations right here. But yeah, I like I think the biggest problem that I had with the ending was like the fact that like they made this bargain where it's like Feyre's like, when it's time to go, we go together, meaning like they're gonna die together, like when one dies. And it's just like, I remember when I first read that, I was just like, that's kind of stupid. Like I get like, okay, they're hopeless romantics, but it's like, guys, this like that's a good idea in theory, but when, as you see in A Course Over Flame, that's not the best idea. Like that wasn't a smart move, because it's like, okay, yeah, but like, well, if both the High Lord and High Lady of the Night Court are dead, then like who's gonna rule the Night Court? Yeah, it's like I don't think they thought about that as this was happening, and I guess it was supposed to be like a cute moment, but I'm just like, this isn't cute. Like it's like, okay, sure, and then they're flying in the sky at the end, and it's a sweet ending, but it's also like, there are like consequences to certain things. But definitely based off of ACOWAR, there are certain things I would like for to be touched upon in future novels, such as like the whole Moore thing, with her sexuality. Like I definitely want that to be talked about more, and also like the whole Helion and like Lucian, him being his dad thing. Like obviously the fact that like it's talked about, I feel like it's gonna have to be like talked about further. Like I feel like we can't just leave it at like, oh yeah, Helion's Lucian's dad, and it's just that. Like I feel like Lucian has to find out or Helion has to find out. Like I feel like it doesn't make sense to like bring that up unless it's gonna come to light, or like the Lady of the Autumn Court is gonna like admit it. I feel like it's weird to just bring that up. So I think in a future novel, it's gonna be talked about. Like maybe we'll talk more about Lucian and like what's happening with like the band of exiles that they have. Like I don't know, we'll see about that. But that's something I'm hoping gets talked about in the future. So next we have A Quarter Frost and Starlight, and pretty much, I know the first time I read it, I was like hyped for it. I was just like, okay, like although like ACOWAR was kind of like the end of like Reese and Farrah's story, I knew there were going to be more stories to be told. And as far as I understood, like before reading it, I kind of knew that it was supposed to, I guess, bridge the gap between like the original story and like the spinoff. So like I was like really hyped for it, and then I read it, and I was just kind of just like, it's just like one big fanfic. That's all this is. Like like there's really no plot with ACOFAS. It's more like okay, winter solstice and like them kind of dealing with kind of the aftermath of the war and trying to live their lives and trying to be happy during winter solstice, which is cute and all. Like at some points, I feel like this like it's a fanfic pretty much, and it's just like okay, this is nice and all, but like did I really have to pay money for this? Like I feel like Sarah could have just, if not given this to us for free, we could have got it for a little cheaper, because I feel like it's like I probably could have found like a fanfic on Tumblr that would have done more or less the same thing. That being said, like while I don't love this book or even really like it, I don't hate it. Like I think A Court of Frost and Starlight is tolerable. Like I can tolerate it. Like I think I can read it without getting too mad. Like there's a couple parts where I'm just like, what? But like most of it, it's kind of like I'm fine with it. Like I think the thing that annoyed me the most was Reese's perspective, because for some reason I don't like Reese in this book that much. Like I think it's because I don't like him from his own perspective. Because like he says mate so much, and then also he's always like talking about like his thoughts are like a teenage boy, and it's kind of weird because it's like, aren't you like 500 years old? And it's like, I don't know, like I feel like I don't like Reese from his own perspective. Like I like Reese from Favor's perspective because like her chapters are like better, and even like Cassian's chapters, but it's just like it's really weird sometimes. Also, I really liked like Reese's chapters, like his chapter at the end of ACOMAF and his chapter at the beginning and at the end of ACOWAR. Like I liked his perspective then, but I don't know, something about this, like I don't know, maybe it's the way Sarah like wrote him this time. It feels weird. It's just, I don't know. Like when he starts talking, I'm just like, really? Like this is like his thought process? I don't know. Like it feels like not fully out of character, but it feels like the words he chooses and like the way he talks, it just like, is this really Reese's thought process, or is this just like, I don't know. I don't even know how to explain it. It's like the favorite chapters are fine. We don't really have like a lot of more chapters. I think there are a couple more chapters, and hers are fine. I think what like threw me off is kind of like the switch between first person POV and like third person. Like I don't know. Like it threw me off. Like I feel like it's really weird because it goes from like first person POV with like Fair and Reese's chapters to third person with Cassian, Moore, and Nesta's chapters, which is kind of like jarring because it's just like, as you can see, like the chapters you see like their names, so it's like who's talking. So I feel like it was kind of weird to like have that weird back and forth. Like I think I get it because obviously like the original 3 books, it was from first person POV, and then like the newer books like Quarter Silver Flame is from third person omniscient. But I still feel like, I don't know, maybe it's just me, but like for like one book, I feel like it's weird to go back and forth between points of view. Like I feel like just keep it the same, because it's like at the beginning of each chapter we know the person's name, like who's telling the story. So it's I don't know, like it felt weird to me. Like I think that's the main critique that I have of it. It's really weird with the point of view switch. And like talking about like the fact that, you know, it reads like a fanfic. I think Sarah J. Maas herself said that like she kind of started out writing this as a fanfic, and then like I guess her publisher kind of was just like, oh, you should publish it. So I guess that being said, it's understandable why it's reads like a fanfic, because it pretty much is a fanfic. But I don't know. It just I feel like as far as like the price, it could have been like a little bit less if we were gonna do that, or like I mean I get it's like 200 pages, so it isn't like you could have just put it at the end of like ACOWAR and be like, oh yeah, here's some extra stuff. You know, I guess you would have had to like make it like a separate novella, but it still feels like kind of weird sometimes. I definitely feel like one of the best parts of it was like the snowball fight, because it's like it's like you just imagine like these three like Illyrian warriors, 500 years old, and they're just having a snowball fight. Like every year they just do that. And I'm like, that is really cute. And I think there are some like cute moments in it, because like obviously it's around, you know, winter solstice, like in Feyre's birthday. So obviously there are like a lot of happy, like kind of like lighthearted moments. There are also like heavier moments. But like I don't know, like I feel like it is like almost like a reprieve from ACOWAR. Like I feel like it was kind of meant to be like obviously like deal like with the traumas that they're dealing with post war, but also kind of like have like these lighthearted moments. I think that's what it was intended to do. Like I think like the whole like present buying part is like cute, and the fact that like Moore apparently buys really bad presents. Like I think that was like a running joke in this. It's just like Moore is not good at like getting presents. And of course here we meet Emery, who is a she owns a shop in, I don't know if it's Windhaven, but it's somewhere in Ilaria where like she's an Ilarian. She owns a shop, and like Cassie meets her in this book. So we kind of like meet her and get to know her. And also Feyre goes to like this kind of like abandoned art gallery, or maybe it was an art gallery. Like, you know, she meets this other Fae, and like she's talking about it, and you know, the other woman's kind of just like, hey, I mean, you can buy it. I'm sure the people would just gladly give it to you. And she's like, no, I'm not ready for that yet. And like I feel like because the book is, well, it's like so short that it's just like there's instances where like Feyre like has like this opinion on something and is like, I'm not gonna do it, but then by the end she does it. Like with, you know, the art, open up the art gallery, like at first she's like, I don't want to do that, and then towards the end she does it. Same thing with like not wanting to have a kid. Like at first she's like, I'm not ready for that, then by the end she's like, I'm ready for that. Like I don't know, it just feels like certain things, it happens way too fast. Like I feel like this is all within the span of a week and I'm just like, she changed her mind that fast. Like I don't know, like it just, certain things like that, it was kind of just like, I don't know if that would happen like that. And the part where she's like, I think she's with Elaine and she's like shopping for gifts, and she goes into this like weaver shop, and the weaver's talking about like making this very black tapestry called the Void. And then, you know, she's pretty much giving up like her story. She's like, her husband died in the war, like he volunteered to go in, and you know, she says something and she's just like, it could have been me, it could have been Reese. And I'm just like, well, technically it was Reese. Like Reese did die. He was brought back, but he died. Like I'm just saying, like the way she's saying it, it's saying like, oh, nothing happened during the war. Like, girl. Then yeah, she ends up buying the tapestry. Yeah, she ends up hanging it in the art gallery, which is cute because it's like the void, and then like the silver in the middle represents hope. And I'm like, oh, that's sweet. Also, one thing I do appreciate about ACOFAS is the fact that we are seeing like kind of like the rebuilding of Valeris after like, you know, after the attack that happened in Akamath, but also like after the war, like people whose parents died, whose like family members died during the war. Like I think it is important to like touch upon that, because I mean that makes it like it adds a little bit of realism to it. Like it shows like the consequences of everything that happened. Like not everything happens like in a vacuum, you know, like obviously there's consequences that like, you know, affect, you know, the rest of the world, especially Valeris. And a lot of this does set up, at least like the Nesta and Cassian chapters, it does set up for a Quarter Silver Flame, especially the one like on Solstice where like Nesta shows up. She doesn't really talk, and they're kind of like briefly there, and then she leaves. And then like when she leaves, Cassian follows after her, tries to give her the gift. She's like, no. She's like pushing him away, and then, you know, eventually he like throws the gift in the Sidra, and he still like makes sure she gets home. although like Cassian's upset because during this time, like after the war, Nesta has been, you know, drinking, gambling, hooking up with random men, and he's kind of like he touches upon like he's like, I don't want to know who the bastard was that took her maidenhead, and like that whole thing. And Nesta's still kind of just like, hey, I don't want anything from you. And then he finally accepts it, and he's like, you know, really upset afterwards. And then we have like Nesta's brief like tidbit where she's kind of like back home, and she like it describes like a raging silence, like pretty much she doesn't feel anything, like she feels this like overwhelming numbness that we also talk about later in A Quarter Silver Flames. But like I guess this is like kind of the first like hint of it in this book. And like the chapter with more with like the Court of Nightmares, but also like towards the end where we find out that she has kind of like this estate near the Winter Court called Athelwood, which is like kind of revealed like just now. And I guess like she gets there to be away and in the quiet. And that's also why I feel like one of the next books is going to focus on more, since like she does have her own chapter in this, and it's setting up to like I don't know what her story is going to be exactly, but it might be like focusing on her like, you know, like in I think she was sent to like Valahan or on the continent to like, you know, talk about peace. So I think like part of it might be that, and part of it maybe she'll find like a love interest at some point. Like I think it's sort of setting up for that. It's kind of vague, like as far as like what she's going through and like what's gonna be upon the horizon as far as like a story about more. And then the novella kind of ends with like, you know, Feyre opening up this kind of art studio. It's kind of like, I guess, art therapy thing with like her and Paulina, and you know, focusing mostly on kids who's like facing kind of trauma during the war, which is helpful. And also I guess it also helps her out too. And then at the end, Reese kind of takes her to this like empty like estate, and he's just like, let's build a house here. And he's like, you know, build this and that, build an office and build a nursery, because you know they're trying for a baby now. And when, like, you know, it's cute. And of course, like the last line is like, to the stars who listen, Feyre, to the dreams that are answered, Reese. Like, you know, like I think this book has cute moments. I don't think it's great, you know, but I do think it's bearable. Like I feel like I think the first time I read it, I gave it like 3 stars because I'm just like, it's not horrible. I think if we take it into mind that this was kind of meant to be a fanfic, I feel like it makes more sense. Like it does read like a fanfic, but like obviously like I don't love it. It's definitely like my least favorite ACOTAR book. I mean, I think there's things that like I can enjoy in here. Like there's things like that you can enjoy, like you know some like moments between like some of the characters that are like cute or like that are like funny or lighthearted. Like other than that, like you know, like it is what it is. Kind of like you know this book, it exists. I think we should accept the fact that A Court, A Frost, and Starlight exist. So yeah, that's pretty much how I feel about it. I feel like I feel the exact same about it that I did when I first read it. I think it came out in 2018. So yeah, like I feel the same. Like I didn't love it then, don't love it now. Like I wouldn't even say I like it. I just kind of like about it. Like you know, like I'm kind of like not neutral, but it's just I don't know. It's a book that exists. That's what I'll say about A Quarter Frost Starlight.